Bumblebee got its nickname because when we were testing the system, it was built specifically for us so that we can use it on Britannic project. We had to test it in a pool just to see how it was going to handle in the water. And when I looked at it, I thought, this thing's never going to work. I mean, how are we supposed to take this thing down to 400 feet, swim along the wreck, and be able to maneuver that? So I said, it looks like a bumblebee. Because much like the bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly, when we got in the water with this, it was perfectly neutral. No matter how heavy it was, you could hold it with one hand and tilt it on its axis like this, and be able to handle it, as bulky as that is. And the reason for that is we trim it out with what's called syntactic foam. That's the brown stuff that looks like wood. This is a foam that is incompressible. It will not shrink. It will not compress with depth. And by trimming it out, you could basically make it like its own mini submarine and allow you for these wide shots and panning shots that you'll see a little bit later on. In its first configuration, Bumblebee only had 4 150-watt lights. Later on, we would increase that to 6. The next system was Big Blue. All of these are high-def systems, and as you'll notice, you'll see the cable right here, the fiber optic cable. Again, this was the first time that divers were going to go down into the water using a camera system, but the camera was going to be focused and the white balance and iris adjusted by operator's topside. Because we were going to be using full face masks and communications to allow topside to talk to the cameraman and for the cameraman to talk to them, you would now have only to listen to what they told you to do. They would tell you, go to the bow, we want to get the anchor shot. Okay, hold that. Oh, come back, do that again. And you can now swap out another diver. When you think about 400-foot dives, you're only going to be doing, with a closed-circuit rebreather, a bottom time of approximately 40 minutes, which is still a long time. But we tried to get the most bang for our buck. And by rotating divers out, you would have a diver do a 40-minute dive, and then through comms know that you were about to swap out. Another team would splash. You'd hand out the camera, and in such a way, we would be able to get 80 minutes of underwater footage per dive per day. And as you can see, we have to launch this with the crane. All of the dives on Britannic were done with closed-circuit rebreathers, but our support team would also use open-circuit. And you can see in both formats, you have to use full face masks. As underwater videographers, this is something that you really want to start looking at. The ability for a camera person to talk to his model or to talk to his light person is immeasurable. Although you can get by with hand signals, there's nothing like being able to tell someone back up, stop, pan left, pan right, okay, do that again. And obviously when you're making a dive and it's 20 or 30 minutes of bottom time, you want to get the most good footage that you can on each dive. So a full face mask is important. For 400-foot dives of this magnitude, you can see in this picture Bumblebee on the crane in the background, and that's Evan Kovacs, our director of underwater photography for this project. And he's kitted out as a typical Britannic diver. We were using Inspiration and Evolution closed-circuit rebreathers. He's got 2 11-cubic-foot bailout tanks on either side with various trimixes in them in case his rebreather failed. He happened to be using a Draeger full-face mask. Other people were using Kirby Morgan's. It depends on what you like and what your facial features are. And in the background you can see the island of Kia. This is an actual launch on the 2006 expedition where we go into the water. Obviously we had some problems with the system because it was brand new. And if you're spending this kind of money for the History Channel, you have to have a backup. You can see my partner John Chatterton is jumping into the water with a Sony Mini HD in a Gates housing. On every dive, we brought backup cameras that literally would just sit on the deck of the wreck just in case the main camera systems went down. When you think about it, you've got 20 people mobilized, you've got this vessel, you're only on site for so many days, and the client, which in this case is the History Channel, is expecting you to get the shot, which we did. On this particular dive, we had a very aggressive plan. Our goal was to go into the break inside where Britannic split from the mine damage and travel to go and figure out, again, why she sank as quickly as she did. So studying the blueprints, and obviously a scale model is a great way to start, but there's nothing like trying to visualize where it is you got to go. And in order to do that, what you do is you need to be able to study the blueprints. In this particular instance, you could see the red crack, and our goal was to get into the fireman's tunnel right here and travel to where there is a set of doors right here. Our question was, are those doors open? If they were open, it would account for how come the boiler rooms, which were the largest spaces on the ship, look at how big this is. If one of these boiler rooms had flooded, as well as the front of the ship, that would have been enough to account for why she sank as quickly as she did. Unfortunately, the people who survived the sinking swore that they had closed those doors behind them. So we wanted to find out, were the doors really closed, or was there another breach in here that allowed the water to go in? This was the crux of our mission. This was the whole big question behind the documentary. Now, I like shipwrecks. I love diving in shipwrecks. But I'm not about to do something stupid or risk my life. By utilizing the blueprints, what you try to do is quite literally come up with a plan so that almost if the lights go out, you can get yourself back out. So in this case, we're looking at what the boiler room looks like. This is a side view. And we would have to swim through these openings and bring a camera system with us. So what we did was we created a CG graphic of what that area would look like, laying out our path and some of the things that you would see on it. Not only does this help the viewer at home visualize what it is they're about to see, but helps us. And as you're going to see in a second, on the left is a computer graphic of what it looked like, and that's an actual still that we pulled off of the video camera of that passageway. And you can see the supports that go through there. You can actually see rusticles hanging off the top of the boiler, because again, no one had ever been through there. At the end of that opening, we should see another door, and that door could either be closed like this, or it could be open. Well, when we got to the end of the doorway, you could see it's open. So the people who thought back almost 100 years ago that no one would ever have an opportunity to dive 400 feet and check on them, in a way, they lied. To save their own skin, they got out of there. They said they closed the door, but they didn't. And that door being open was why the ship sank as quickly as she did. Now, that was the 2006 expedition. This year, I returned. And it's amazing what you can do when people give you more money. I think every woman in the store, in the building knows that. If your husband gave you more money, just think of the things you can do. In this case, the money people was National Geographic. And National Geographic offered us a lot more money. Where we had a budget of about $400,000 to produce the first documentary in 2006, now we had $1 million. We had $1 million to come up with a 2-hour special, furthering the research that we had done, and also starting to shoot 3D high-def video with all new camera systems. And the housings you're going to see look very similar, but there's a remarkable difference because we're shooting it now in 3 dimensions. So, like I said, if someone gives you $1 million, that's the boat you could use. And let me tell you something, not only is it cool because it's got a helicopter so you could fly around and get these cool shots, which is really nice for the price, but in a minute you're going to see that logistically it's much better to be on a bigger boat where the boat stays on station for 2 weeks and you use small ribs to go back and forth. You could set mooring balls. As you can see, there's a red ball in the foreground and another one in front of that rib for the different areas on the shipwreck that we wanted to go and explore. There was a problem with using a big ship. Well, how do you get the divers to and from their work? You know, obviously, 400-foot dives are very taxing, and you're carrying all of that equipment. You saw how big the camera systems are. Well, how do you get back and forth? Well, the owners of the vessel, which was the Fort Colt, came up with a very novel idea by putting a swim platform on the back of it so that you could be towed to work. And I really got very fond of this. So this is the way you would go back and forth to work every day, and you get really lazy after a while. You know, you don't have to climb up into the rib. Then when they get you back, okay, now how do you get back up on the boat? Well, again, they had a very novel idea. Because they had a crane, all you have to do is step into the platform and allow them to swing you back up. This makes you very lazy. But again, the whole idea is that after doing a 40 to 50 minute dive to 400 feet, then doing 5 hours of decompression. The last thing you want to do is anything that's strenuous. You want to keep all of your exertion down to a minimum, and this is a great way to recover the team.